Good evening, universe. Tonight I'm going to be talking about Gideon the Ninth, which is the first book in the Locked Tomb series by Tamsyn Muir. This story follows a group of necromancers who travel through space to explore a cross between an abandoned magical necromantic lab and a mansion. So it is this huge arena where they have to do a bunch of exploring and mysteries ensue. First, I'm going to talk about it in non-spoilers, and then we're going to have a little spoiler section, and at the end, I'm going to have a little wrap-up section. So use the timestamps down below to navigate if you want to avoid spoilers. So through this book, we follow the main character, Gideon, who is from a planet called the Ninth. The Ninth is a miserable place. It is cold and dark and pretty lonely. The only person who is around Gideon's age is Harrow Hark. This is kind of a problem because Gideon and Harrow absolutely despise each other. Gideon is really spunky and irreverent. She loves swords and sword fighting and making ridiculous jokes and has this great sense of humor. This is a really stark contrast to Harrow, who is extremely serious and takes all of her duties very seriously. That is kind of important because Harrow is basically this planet's princess. She is known as the Reverend Daughter. On this planet, they have a monarchy that has to do with their religion, which includes looking over an important tomb. Now, Gideon is not a necromancer, but Harrow is, and necromancers are somewhat common in this world, and on this planet, pretty much most of the population is either way older than Gideon or skeletons, like literal actual skeletons who are farming the land and keeping the planet going. And Gideon is sick of it. She's sick of this dark, dreary, lonely planet. So she is always trying to get off world, but her escape attempts are always squashed by Harrow, who prevents her from leaving constantly. But then Gideon gets a chance to get off this miserable planet presented by none other than Harrow herself. So what's going on is that Harrow has been given the opportunity to become a lictor, which is like an immortal, sort of royal person who serves the king undying who rules over the entire solar system. So they're kind of like demigods. They have incredible power and they get to serve this godlike figure. And Harrow wants to become one. And the king undying has just put out basically a call for people, necromancers specifically, who want to come and try and become the lictors. So these are going to be the royal families of all the planets are going to go to one place in order to try to become a lictor. It's kind of like a competition, but there can be all sorts of winners. You just have to do whatever the challenge is in order to achieve the main prize of becoming a lictor. The catch is that the necromancers can only do it if they have a cavalier with them. And a cavalier is basically a sacred bodyguard to the necromancer. Usually they will have been trained specifically with a rapier in order to fully protect their necromancer at all times. Necromancers tend to be physically not so strong. They tend to be much more talented in the magic side of things. So physically they tend to be a little bit shrimpier or a little bit not so talented, and they need a cavalier who is physically strong and able to do combat to fight for them. So the only way for you to be a part of this competition is to bring a cavalier. And Harrow's problem is that her current cavalier kind of sucks. He is a coward, he is not that well trained, and even though he's supposed to have been her cavalier for all this time, he is like not wanting to join her, and so this is a problem. So Harrow proposes to Gideon, be my cavalier, or at least pretend to be my cavalier, get yourself some training with a rapier, and we will be good to go. You can get off this planet by coming with me to this competition, and I will get to follow my goal of becoming a lictor. Gideon is much more familiar with heavier weapons. She prefers to use a two-handed sword, but she agrees to the challenge of learning the rapier so that she can get off the planet, even if it means having to go with Harrow. So they go to the first house in order to pursue becoming a lictor. And what this means They're not really sure because the process is sort of unknown to everybody. Even the people there who seem like they would have the knowledge don't give any clear answers. So Harrow and Gideon arrive on the planet. It's called the First, and the rest of the planets each have their own representative necromancer with a cavalier, so we have kind of a larger cast, and all of them are going to try to become lictors. So part of the problem, of course, is finding out how they do that. They're told that they can explore the facility and that within the facility should be the answers to their questions. The only rule is that they cannot go through a locked door that they don't have the key to. And then from there, it kind of becomes a murder mystery situation while they're also trying to figure out how one might become a lictor. That is pretty much all I can say without getting into spoilers. So now I'm going to be jumping into my spoilery thoughts about some of the things that happened in this book. If you want to avoid the spoilers, skip ahead to the end and I'll go over kind of my general feeling about this book. So spoilers start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so I thought this book was amazing because of the way that it made me care so much about all of these characters, and then it killed most of them. I thought it was really impressive how every death was so impactful, even though there were so many of them, and how I cared about every character, even though we only had brief moments with them, because there were so many, as well as the overarching mystery. My favorite characters, aside from Harrow and Gideon, were definitely Palomides and Camilla, but I also loved the way that Coronabeth was sort of built up as this incredible, beautiful, amazing character, and then the way that she was kind of torn down into something smaller and weaker over the course of the book. I also loved Abigail and Magnus and even the teens. I thought they were all so fantastic and charming, and I really despised Silas. I thought that the narrative did a great job of making me absolutely hate his guts. He seemed like a wonderful secondary sort of challenge, a secondary sort of villain. I didn't really feel like we had villains versus heroes so much in this because everybody is so flawed and so human, but I particularly felt that Silas was especially despisable. And I love that it wasn't him that ended up being the big bad. It was Dulcinea. I thought the reveal of that was fantastic, especially because she seemed so frail the entire time. And even though we have her frailty through the novel, we also have Harrow being like, she's more than she seems. And we have that kind of challenge of, is Harrow being jealous in some way, or is she right that there is something else going on with Dulcinea? I was really rooting for Palomides the entire time he was fighting her, and his death was definitely the worst for me. I was so rooting for him to make it through, but it only makes sense that he wouldn't have had the power to take her down. Speaking of deaths, that ending with the loss of Gideon was shocking and devastating and definitely made me cry. But I also loved it. I think it's so bold and great to take the main character that the book is named after and kill them. I thought that was fantastic. I also loved the reveals of Harrow being the product of mass death on her planet, as well as the reveal of Gideon being disliked because she somehow resisted a poison that was supposed to kill her. And there were so many mysteries around Gideon's birth and life that I found it especially surprising that she would be killed before we got the answer to those mysteries. This is definitely one of those books that left me with more questions than it gave me answers to. There's so many things that I wonder about Gideon's life. The world overall is extremely mysterious. I want to know more about the king undying, especially with that little snippet that we got. There were so many things that I wanted to know, and this really opened up well for book 2, and there were just so many moments in it that were fantastic. So now I'm going to move back to no more spoilers, just so that I can talk about my overall feelings about it. I absolutely loved this book. It was heart-wrenching, gross, set up in a confusing way, and very hilarious. The lore is definitely set up in a way that does not hold the reader's hand, which I thought was awesome because it made me even more curious and more interested in learning about the world and getting to understand the lore of the universe. And since it's about necromancers, I thought it was only appropriate and perfect that everything was so visceral and kind of gross. That really added to its charm and its uniqueness. At the time of this recording, I've finished reading the second book in the series, Harrow the Ninth. Definitely have lots of thoughts about it, so I'll be doing a video about that one as well. Probably a video about everything in the Locked Tomb, because this series just gives me so much to think about. It's so interesting and different and unique. The prose was incredible, specifically because it's very irreverent. It feels like it doesn't follow conventions in a lot of ways that I've seen, and that made it very refreshing, which I really enjoyed. I thought it was fantastic. I think this series is probably going to go in my favorite series of all time, but I'm only, 2 books in and it's not complete yet, so I won't know for a while how it turns out. I think we're getting the final book, Alecto the Ninth, this year, supposedly, but there's no release date yet, so we'll see. I'm not exactly holding my breath on that, but I'm hoping that the later release date of the 4th book will give me time to possibly do a reread of the entire series, because this already seems like one that you pick up more information and understand a lot more once you do a reread. Also, I just love these characters so much, so hanging out with them again for a second read through is definitely something that I would look forward to. Overall, I absolutely love this series. I think it is fantastic and unique. I would not recommend it to people who are sensitive to gore and viscera and that sort of really minute details about the human body and blood and guts and all that. If you're not into that, then this is not going to be the series for you. But I really loved it and I can't wait to continue reading it. I am going to take a little break between book 2 and book 3 just because I want to step away, kind of digest everything I read in book 2. Book 2 was a lot. Like I said, I have lots of thoughts, but I am really looking forward to picking up book 3. I already have it from the library, and I'm really excited to continue this series. Let me know if you've read it, what you thought. Please mark your spoilers if you happen to have any spoilery thoughts. And thank you so much for joining me, and have a great night, universe.